I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatches Livestream number 59. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the art submissions for the Siren and Enchanter Art Challenge. These are the finals. 2 weeks ago, we took a look at the submissions for the concepts, and now we're going to see what they did with that feedback. I am, of course, your host, Clint Cearley, illustrator and art educator, best known for my work with Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons. But we're not going to really be looking at my work on this episode. We're just going to be looking at what you have, and I will try to give you the best feedback that I can in order to help you improve on your images. I'm going to just double check my stream settings that everything looks good over here. That looks pretty good. We will go through a couple of announcements first, and also just allow people a couple of minutes to join in live, and then we'll jump over to doing the actual feedback. All right, it looks like we already have some people in here, so connection is good. How's it going, everybody? Hobbit? Boss? Awa, good to see you guys. Appreciate you taking the time to come in. I know that we changed up the time this week. Normally we do it 2 hours later. But yeah, I know that's really hard for the European crowd. They have to stay up really late to watch it. And I do need a certain amount of time. Like the deadline for submission is at noon, and then I needed a couple of hours to go over them and handle stuff on my end and prep everything. So 5 p.m. I think works out better for most people. You guys let me know in the feedback whether this is a better time for you or not. If it is, then I'll see about trying to adopt this to be more of a permanent thing. All right, so... Oh, we've got a lot of people coming in. Anika, Kazuma, Esri, Federico, Shane. Good to see everybody. Kaloa. How are you? I'm doing pretty good. I feel pretty good. And we've got all the notes put in for what we'll cover. So that's already been taken care of. Only did a little repaint really on one image, so we don't have a lot in that department, but I think the feedback will be good. I got my water too. A lot of times I forget that, but that'll do good. Some good feedback on the better earlier time. Thank you. I'm glad it works out for you guys. All right, so just running through basically standard announcements, not too much new or different this time. Just a reminder, next week will be a new Vibrance episode. We're going to be doing it the same way that we did last week, in that I will pre-record the actual proper Vibrance episode, which will probably be something short in the 5 to 10 minute range. And then that will be a premiere. It will come out at 7, well, I don't know. I will let you know when it's coming out. We might do it at an earlier time as well. But I'll let you know, probably 5 or 7 p.m. my time. And then I will follow it with a live stream. It will be a Q&A live stream. That is where you can throw me questions based on what I covered in the Vibrance episode. You can ask me questions about work habits, time efficiency, health issues. And then we can even talk about, art business, that sort of thing, or studying habits with art. I won't be doing image reviews as far as that direction. Big thank you to everyone who voted in the art challenge for the next art challenge subject. That, of course, is already closed. We will look at that as soon as we get done with the announcements and see what the poll results were. And then tickets for the challenge, if you want to be involved in the next art challenge, they will go on sale tomorrow on the Gumroad store. I will share a link when those get posted on the Facebook group. So if you're not already out there, then go to swatches.group. It will send you right to the Facebook group, and I will share a link. You can go pick those up if you want to join in the next challenge. If you want to get any of my art education materials, the videos and the ebooks, then those are available on swatchesart.com. I have a variety of different subjects that I talk about. The newest one that's out there is the same one as last time. I haven't put anything new out since last time. which is the painting process. I break down the painting process into 10 steps, giving you an outline of what you should and shouldn't do at each step. We also have ebooks on the topics of character design, as well as light and color and composition, and a variety of videos showing my workflow and the creation process of different images that I have created. Okay, that wraps it up for general announcements. So let's take a look at the poll results, which were over here. Okay, I put out about 5 different, I put out 5, and then Tyler added one, which was Thief. And the top 2 were the Valkyrie and the Oni Hunter, getting what would be 60 votes for that one, and 36 for Oni Hunter. Valkyrie, Norse mythology, descends to a fallen Viking to take him to Valhalla. And then Oni Hunter, which is more of a portrait image, minimal background, waist-up view of the last of the Oni demon hunters in their Asian-inspired clothing with like an Oni kind of style mask. I'm going to do another double feature. You guys really liked that approach to it, instead of just limiting it to one specific topic, that you can choose between the 2 most popular ones. Even though the Valkyrie was almost twice as much as the Oni, it seemed like there were some people that really liked the idea of doing an Oni Hunter. So it will be a double feature with those top 2. And I will write up the proper full art description, and that will be in the information in the ticket package that you might purchase tomorrow. And then I will share that also on the Facebook group. So if you want to just follow the art challenge without getting your stuff reviewed or without buying a ticket, then you're welcome to do that, and you will have access to that information. You just will not be able to submit it for review for the live stream. But I will write that up, and that will be available. Also try to pull together whatever inspiration or references that you might want, or that I might have regarding those particular challenges. And those will be included in the package as well. Okay, so if you are just joining in, or you were not around for the concept and kickoff to this challenge, this is the breakdown of what they are trying to follow for this challenge. Basically, they had the choice between doing either a Siren from kind of myth, or doing the Enchanter's workshop. And the Siren should be in a ominous sort of scenario, ominous weather. She should be alluring, but also a little uneasy, or kind of a dark feel to it, because there's bodies or skeletons sort of around her, giving the idea that maybe she's, killing these people or drowning them or something. And we could have other narrative bits around her, such as shipwrecks and, stuff from shipwrecks. The Enchanter's workshop should show a table or work area, or things that they have collected in their workshop, and doesn't have a character in it, just has what their working area is. Let's see. Oh yeah, also, if you're throwing a question to me in the live chat when you're watching this, put Swatches at the beginning of your comment. It will flag that for me, and I will know that that is directed to me personally and not just you guys talking to each other. So try to put Swatches in there if you're directing it to me. I just saw there was a question of how do we pay for a ticket. That would be on the Gumroad store, which is gumroad.com/swatches, Gumroad, Gumroad. And it would go up as an item for purchase. There is a limited number, which will be 12. And there will be, I might push it up to $20. For as much time as I'm putting into these, I think I might raise it an extra $5. Initially, I thought I would be taking less time, but I think people are just getting so much out of it that it's worth pushing it up just a little bit on the price. So You will also be provided a PSD template as they were for this one, and I will expect everybody to submit stuff following the PSD template. And there will be a video explaining how to use that and, making that happen. So there you go. Yeah, PayPal takes a variety of different payments, credit cards, debit cards, and I think they do PayPal as well. So that is what they're doing. And we're going to just start off with, alphabetically. And Anika, if I'm saying that right, hopefully, we'll start here. Okay. I'm going to close that. We don't need that. And I'm going to shove some of my little stuff around here. Situated. Okay. So, Anika, this is the final image that was submitted, and we already have, if you're, again, some people join in, this might be your first time. So what you have is her main image, I'm sorry, I apologize, I don't know what your gender is. They have their main image right here, their initial sketches, composition ideas here. Ideas as far as art or lighting here, pose references for the main character are here, and then we have value studies, color studies, and references for the environment down there. Any notes that they want to throw to me or have things addressed, they can put down here, and the images all follow that basic layout. Okay. So the notes that I was looking at, let's start with number 1, which is their comments. Comment was, I decided to change my whole painting for better results, but still I feel like I've missed something. Am I going in the right direction? Thanks. So if you missed it, this was their initial image that they had submitted, this one right here. And I had talked about increasing her size. She's just a little small for the image, so I had suggested making her a bit larger in the frame. Also, there was a kind of an odd composition thing going on where everybody just fit in their own area, and there was very little overlapping going on. It made everything feel just a little too posed and not very natural. There wasn't enough unevenness with the way it was laid out. So they decided to go with a new concept and went with this one. So sometimes this is the right decision. Sometimes it isn't. And this actually comes up for a couple of the different images submitted this time. So let's go ahead and talk about it briefly. And I've said it before, but some images you want to push through. You're getting some difficulty, you're getting some pushback from the image, it's not turning it out the way you want. And you have two choices. You can either keep working with it, figure it out, find solutions and make it work, or you can start over. And I have a video about that called Biting the Bullet. It's on the channel here, you can go watch it. And it deals primarily with making the decision to start over. Start a new direction. And the rule of thumb that I go by is, does the image have good bones? Is it fundamentally flawed, or you just having difficulty making it all work together? And I don't think that this image had bad bones. Bad bones is it has a flawed concept. It's not conveying what it needs to convey in any effective manner. Okay, then change that. It is flawed in that it has a fundamentally bad composition or character design, in which case you might want to restart on some of those. Or the value scheme is totally wrong. Something about it is just fundamentally wrong with the image. This one isn't. It checks all the boxes of what the image should be, and I think that you should have just pushed with it. Because what you have done is you ran away from the problems that you were facing on this image and ran right back into them on this image. You addressed some of them in some ways, but largely you have the same problems. So my recommendation for you specifically, this artist, is that you need to just work through the image. Learn how to do that. Learn how to address these problems, or they're going to keep being repeated throughout your work. Okay, so pushing through 2. What I will, because this keeps coming up, I will give it a term. Maybe somebody else has a term for it. I don't know what it is. I will call it object shyness. What you can see if you look up at trees, say that you have an image, you're just looking up at trees. I'm talking about real life, and you got the trees coming up at the top of the canopy, and you have tree canopies here, all kind of doing this, right? There's a thing called canopy shyness, I believe is what it's called, where you'll notice that there's often space, a little space around each tree canopy, and it doesn't quite touch the other canopies. And this is due in nature to, I think, due to the fact that trees shift around in the wind and they keep buffeting each other. And if they keep growing, what it's going to do is just break off the limbs on the ends where they keep knocking against each other. So on a still day, you look up and you'll see just these areas of space between the trees. And you're like, well, that's odd. I wonder how they, work that out. And in a similar way, we've got object shyness here where, move that over just a little bit. We have object shyness where this object sits right here and he has his little area, and this rock is careful not to interfere with that. And then it comes up here, and then this wood piece is careful not to touch him. And it's like every element is just shy of another element. This one doesn't touch that one. He keeps his little area. This comes up here. He makes sure he doesn't touch there. And they have their area. And everything is just shying away from everything else. And that's just not how life works. That's not how things work. And it also makes the scene more flat, because the same way that we had a lack of depth that made it feel odd because there was very few things overlapping each other, that we also, again, have not many things overlapping each other. We have a little overlap here. I guess this rope goes behind them, so there's kind of like a little bit of overlapping. But yeah, we need to work and see if we can build more depth out of it. Also, this angle, it seems like you found maybe a reference that had this angle of the pose, but then you didn't have the proper reference for everything else at that particular angle. And things aren't really mashing up. Kind of going off of the object shyness is the way that I don't know what the term is. Let me point it out. It's the way that all these shapes kind of follow each other. So you have the dress shape here, and it's like the rock shape simply follows that. And it follows it right up straight to the shoulder. So we have these kind of tangents going on. Like here, and here a tangent here. We have a tangent here. We have this water. The water, and the thing that's really working to kind of throw off the perspective and depth is it's as if the water is reacting to something on the wrong plane. So the water comes here and it bends up and bends up and bends up and bends up. And there's no way that water should be interacting with that rock. That rock should be like 4 feet off of the water. And we have water here that is bending around the head and the top of this rock. And this is probably a case where these weren't kept on different layers. And it would have been better to have maybe this on one layer, and that way you can just paint the water behind it without having to worry about how they interact. Similar to that is the way that's being shaded and like the shadow coming straight off the tip. Well, intellectually, I know that the tip of this rock should be like sticking out of the water, right? I mean, this whole thing's sticking out of the water. That's why she can sit on it. But yet, if the light was coming there three-dimensionally, like the tip shadow should be, you know, going off that way somewhere, not off of the actual tip, because that's not touching the water. So there's kind of a misunderstanding of the 3D environment going on here. If you haven't already, you need to put in a perspective grid so that you know three-dimensionally what's going on in this scene, and that's going to help you keep track of it better. Object shyness. 3, lighting direction. So the lighting direction is, it's kind of undetermined, and that's something that would help. So, you know, I'm going to suggest do both of these, right? Go back and push through. You're going to learn more from pushing through and doing both of these more accurately than just starting another piece. I guarantee you will grow more and learn more, and it will be ultimately more effective use of your time to do that than starting another variation or starting another piece. That is going to be my recommendation. So here, like, the lighting direction is undetermined, and I think that is all the lighting direction is kind of fuzzy and ambiguous because you're not properly understanding the 3D environment. And if you, as the artist, don't fully understand the 3D environment, then you're going to go with ambiguous lighting. You're just going to kind of fuzz the whole issue. Sorry, my nose is itching. So make sure that you understand that. Work that out. Number 4, more on the minor side, but the anatomy is a little off here. I'm not sure what your reference is. And I expect to see the other arm somewhere. I don't know what that other arm is doing, like whether it should be up here on that rock or down on here, or she's got her hand, you know, resting on this guy's head. But it needs to be somewhere. It looks like she just has one arm. The anatomy here too is a little odd, so we need to double check that. Make sure you have a reference pose or at least a 3D model that you're going off of. Number 5, this guy, again, similar to this, it looks like this guy was the idea of a guy. You kind of blocked it in, but it doesn't feel like an actual figure. He doesn't have any hair. You don't see wounds. You don't see... He looks kind of mannequin right now. It doesn't feel like a real chap. You know, torn shirt. Looks like somebody that just got beat up and died in a shipwreck. Right. Number 5, which I don't have 5, but is some shipwreck references like this. It's something I've talked about before, which is we have to go from generic to specific. I say that to a lot of people. That's one of the cases here. And this is fine. This is an idea. You're establishing the concept of her being in a shipwreck, or at least a shipwreck area. Okay, fine. But now that you have that idea, you need to combine that with actual references. There's 2 components to doing this successfully. This is important. There are 2 components. Component 1, the idea. Component 2, references. The idea, that creativity, is going to give the concept for what is there. It's going to give the subject, all right? It sets the subject. but references are going to provide the believability. Believability? You dropped the E, yeah? Maybe not. Anyway, I might be misspelling that. Believability. And those are the two things. Right now, you have a lot of concepts which determine your subjects, but you don't have adequate references to bring the believability. And I just Googled like shipwrecks, and I found these two. So I didn't hunt very long, but even that would give you some good stuff to work from as far as this. Now, I recently watched Aquaman, and I remember that there was like a shipwreck scene, that they were in a shipwreck in there. So, you might even go watch that or find some screen captures and get some ideas from that as well. I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully you find that helpful. Some good stuff going on there. Don't save. Okay. And jump over to the next one. I'll take a look at chat in between images and take whatever questions you might be throwing to me. So let me see what we have here. Joka1995 says, Swatches, are you still streaming on Twitch? No, I am not currently streaming on Twitch. I would like to, but the situation is when I started streaming on Twitch, I was able to do that because I had good enough connection where I lived at home at that time. But right now I don't. I have to drive up here to town and bring my computer with me and set up in order to do that. And I'll do that once a week for a live stream for the show, but I'm not going to do that just for a Twitch stream. Because that would just be casual painting, and if I do it, I'm going to just do it from home so I don't have to come to town and everything. So until I move to another location that has better internet at my home, then I'm probably not going to be doing anything with the Twitch stream. Okay, this one is by Anna. Anna, good to see you putting in a lot of good work on this image for the final image. So let's walk through the notes here. First up is, I'd also like to know if I went too far with the, okay, so she says, I struggle a lot with it, especially with the size of the features like arms, legs, and so on. I like to keep the fog brighter as if it was glowing magically. I hope it doesn't throw off the values too much. I also like to know if I went too far with the blur. Okay, so let's talk about that first. And no, I don't think you went too far with the blur. I think you have a good balance with that for this particular image. So that wouldn't be a major critique. And the brighter fog, I think, is fine. The main thing, if you want like magic fog, give it a bit more color than it would normally have, or make it have more distinct curls and stuff. I think yours has a good balance. It is not so bright as to just be too wild and to break up the value scheme too much. I think that's because you did add plenty of color to it, which is a really good decision in this case. So overall, your progress, point 2, 3 different areas that you went after, which was the values, the eye level, and the cloth, because the original submission, which you have here, you did change the color scheme to being blue dominant, but you addressed the eye level because the eye level was way up here for a lot of the scene, but it was down here on the character, and it was just too mix matched, and you did make a lot of effort to adjust that. So this is far more effective with the eye level being consistent on the scene, and good job on that. The values feel a lot better, and overall you just cut down on the hazy fuzziness everywhere and went in and really just cleaned things up with the fuzziness, and also really good. And I appreciate the extra work on the cloth. This felt, again, kind of generic, just like the idea of cloth. This feels much more like cloth. So overall, I think you did really excellent addressing the points that we talked about. So moving on from here, what are some things that we can discuss? Number 3, one of the biggest issues for me is these scales and that I know you're adding in some non-human elements to the character design, specifically with like the little fins coming off of the ear area, the adjustment to the eye, and the little fin like on the arm. But these scales aren't really working. So I was just seeing what that noise was. These scales look almost like something that was just, pasted on her rather than actually being part of her natural anatomy. So I'm going to suggest finding a different way to do that. Either remove them or incorporate them more. Let's see, I want to think that I did some stuff on that here. I pulled over these two images. Like, this shows examples of getting a blend between the human and like mermish, since you're kind of going that direction. And that you can keep a lot of the features, but you notice how they blend it together, right? They let the features kind of go over into the human side. They let some of the colors, like the markings, that's something you could really think about, is having kind of bluish markings and patterning, because fish have incredible patterns of colors that go across them. So maybe you have like, instead of scales, it's more like bluish patterns that come off of the arm and kind of stripes that go over the character, and maybe down, around the eye, and then a couple little streaks coming down the chin and the cheek. And that could be in place of the scales or in addition of. It looks like I moved something accidentally. So this was over here. One of the things that you could do is come in here and try to give the skin like a luminescent quality. Fish scales have that kind of, not luminescent, almost that sheen, right? The mother of pearl sheen to scales. And so I got a overlay layer and painted it with blues and cyans. And it can give that same sort of feel to it. And also painting out their abrupt scales. You could also consider, you don't say you have to, but if you wanted to consider adding more of the kind of mermish qualities, maybe she has gills like on the side. So, she wouldn't have lungs necessarily, but like she could have gills between her ribs. I don't know, just a thought. But that might work a little better. It's not as stand out as individual scales, but the scales are kind of part of the skin and they just fade up, in different areas. I was playing with the shadow here. I think with the direction that you have the light coming down, the shadow would cast further on the face. And and not as immediately noticeable, but adding some more color into the hair. The hair is very gray right now, just very gray. And this is a wonderful group of colors to use. So consider pushing over into some of the blues and this kind of the sea greens, and that could be really nice in the hair, and also bring some of those tones more around the eye. I was playing around with the idea of maybe even the lips having more of the bluish quality and less of the warms. But I'm just trying to give you some options to think about that. And then pushing the light up on the hair. You're having white hair with a fairly strong light on it, which means that the hair should be almost just white. And pushing that up even further. A side note, and this could be my personal preference, but I like this hairstyle more. That this just has a natural kind of waviness to it. This feels like a bit more like it was permed. The way you have these big folds to it. And it's not real natural for the hair to have so many of these anti-gravity arches to it. This is more natural, just a waviness. So if this has smaller waves, right, that would feel, yeah, it would just feel more natural and less, hair salon, which it has a bit more of that. I also consider breaking this up so it's not just one solid group, but there's like a break, and then maybe there's some individual smaller groups of hair there, or maybe some hangs down and kind of folds back over the shoulder. Just not such a solid group there. Okay, what else? 4, 5, kind of talk about that. With the light on your initial images that you were looking at here, and like this light has a bit of a cooler tone to it. So she's actually warmer in the shadows and a little bit cooler in the light. Although the light is just over to the cool side. It's not real blue, but you could consider having a bit more color to your light to keep it away from the grays. Just let's make sure we're not going too gray with the things in the lit areas. What else? Was there anything else? I'm finding the background pretty successful. Nothing feels abruptly wrong with it. I would look at it. I would kind of accept it. Okay. The ship feels much better, much more realistic, and the eye level that it's at. This back group right here, I think it has some good shapes, but maybe just edge it out with not quite so dark like on that fellow there, and maybe a little bit less dark. I actually want to lower my opacity. I'd have a little bit more distance kind of added with that. And then try a lighten. Oh yeah, it's still on 25. Just keep the black a little bit more here and not just in the whole image. Just try to separate the black, bring up the value of that that sky background a little bit. Not a major change. I mean, you could just do it in a minute, but yeah. The artist, making a comment here saying, are the clouds behind her head not working, making a weird circle? Should I take it out and fill it with darker clouds? I thought about talking about that, and it is a little odd. I know people can use clouds for kind of take a liberty with them. I still like the difference of some light and darker tones with them. It is a little odd that you have that unless you're going to add, like a moon behind her, like you're going to actually put a moon there. If you're not going to run further with it, then yeah, I'd probably take it out and then continue the same pattern, but instead of it being right here, let it be like up here, so that you kind of got a circling doing this thing, and then it allows it to be a little bit darker behind the head. Because I like some sort of flow to the clouds, and that's fine. And you can give the idea that a moon just out of frame there at the top, and you kind of have a glow there. And we assume that there's some sort of magic light wherever she is with light coming down. We don't have to justify why there's a light there, but yeah. Okay, anything else? No, I think that does it, and that's about right on time. So I'll wrap it up there. You really, Anna, you did excellent work of addressing all the different issues we talked about. Certainly an excellent image. I think you're right up there at like 80%, 90% finished with this. What changes I'm talking about right now are going to be far less than what you did on the last, step. So, just see about adding a little bit color back into her. Let's make the character design flow a bit more of a natural biology from one element, the human element, to kind of I'll call it the mermish element of her, and just tweak some of those background blacks and keep those a little softer. So that should work for you. Next we have Anna-Maria. Oh yeah, all right. This one is another one that's progressed really well. Stuck with your initial concept, and I didn't add the sketch in here, but it was basically this, not as detailed. Very few things changed other than just fleshing it out, giving it a better refine. You played around with better shapes of the rocks. Those are much more interesting, much more realistic. And we're gonna start looking at the comments. Number one and two, we're gonna answer questions from the chat here. Man, I want to put something under my drawing pad because that is uneven. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna grab something from here to keep this pad from moving. Yeah, this table is not completely even. Okay, there we go. Hobbit, is this your image? You're just saying, here we go, wish me luck. Let me know, is this your image? I don't know everybody's username with their submission name, so yeah. Okay, grab me something we can see. Yeah. Okay. So it says, it seems like there's something wrong with the perspective, but I can't really work out what it is. The foreground skulls are smaller than they should be, but if I made them bigger, they lead the eye a little too strongly in my opinion. But maybe I'm wrong. Also, is the blood red too bright? Thanks for all the advice. So first up is talking about the perspective. You feel like the perspective's wrong a little bit. And if it is, which it probably is a little bit, I'm with you that it wouldn't be very much. And it mainly is just a size issue. So let's take a look at that. I don't know why I listed those as 2. That should have been 2. Let me answer 2 first. The red down here, I believe is what you're talking about. No, not too much. Very well handled. It works excellently as a second read. That I actually looked at the image and I looked at her and I saw the shipwreck and I noticed the skulls, and that was actually like the second or third thing that I noticed in the image, and it was a really nice little discovery that you're like, oh, blood. Oh wow, I didn't even notice that when I first looked at it. So that's pretty good. I would be happy keeping it there. But talking about the perspective and the size, let's pull in. And I drew a skull matching the size of her skull, and I copied and moved that skull down here to compare it to the size of this skull. And yeah, size-wise, this guy is 20% smaller than this guy, 10% at least. And the fire truck is pulling out, if you can hear that noise in the background. Okay. So this does need to be bigger. It needs to be at least as big as this one. If not, it does need to be slightly bigger because it is actually closer to us by a couple of feet. And so that's what I did here. I scaled that up to about what I felt that would be. You could run perspective lines and work out exactly how big it would be. Personally, I probably wouldn't. I would just eyeball it. If you want to do that, you can, but I think you could probably eyeball it. Just make it a little bigger. And that also goes for over here as well. This one is a good deal too small. If this head was this close to the camera, it would be quite a bit larger. So I put that up to what I think would feel more correct. But I'm also not sure how close this rock is to us. This rock could very well be very close to the camera, in which case the skull could be quite large. And I also think that could work as well. As long as you keep this in a value range, a darker value range and kind of muted so it rests in this area overall, then I don't think it will be really distracting. It's a good narrative thing that you don't want them to miss. Now, something else that you need to watch the size on is these fellas, the coins. The coins are too small. I take it that these are like a gold doubloon or something. Those things are about that big. I mean, they're not pennies. Pennies, well, at least here in America, pennies are fairly small. But if we're talking about like a gold doubloon, then like these guys need to be. If we have the skulls there, these gold pieces need to be fairly large, like at least the size of your eye socket area. So, that big, but at an angle. Then down here, they need to be, somewhere in that region, size-wise. And that was also going to help just with the depth. Small thing with the perspective here that might help on the character. The character feels pretty good, but maybe we're not quite looking up at her enough. And the perspective is working good with that. I think the breasts, they feel like they're not following the angle of the, I actually did not make the change here, but let me do it. They're not following the same angle as the shoulders. And all of the chest is going to follow the angle of the shoulder. Where you're going to start getting a change is at the bottom of the rib cage, where the rib cage and the waist start, differentiating their angles. But the breast and the chest muscles are always going to follow that same angle as the shoulder line. So the shoulder line is running here, and the perspective it's going to flatten out a little bit, but I still feel like it could be a bit more like that to match that angle. But try this. Like here, one of the things is it feels like I'm looking down on this belt because everything's curving this way, where because it is over our eye line, we should be looking up at it. Like on this character here, if you were to run angles, like we're looking well up at the chest, up, that's all going to curve up. And then over here, we're not really looking up at it. It feels flat. So let's make sure that this stuff is all curving up. I just did a real fast warp to it. You'd probably want to rework it so it has the proper curve. Another place you might see that curve is this is too straight. That's as if we're looking straight at it. Where here, it's not going to be straight. We're going to get this curve as we go over that here, right? So less this and more like that, if that makes sense. And those small changes should help kind of give the perspective viewing a little better. Okay, next, opt light. This is not a mistake. This is just something I want you to be aware of if you have not thought about it. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And that is when you have a really ambient, kind of foggy scene like this, which is what we talked about, and I think you've pulled it off very well and it's done effectively. You can add in an opt light on the side very easily because it's just an edge light and it has very little color, and it's just as if there was a bit of light cutting through one of the clouds and it's catching her along there. It does change the mood a little bit, but you might like that direction. And it allows you to throw in just a little extra color. So in this case, if I add the light, I would add it about like this. It's basically just white along, the edge area. Make sure you're following the form. And then, catching the edge of the ear gives you that little pop of color with the ear being backlit. And you get a little color from the hair itself. But overall, the light is probably not going to be real warm. It's still going to be fairly desaturated or cool, which means that you're going to get more of a purple rather than like an orange. Right? You're not going to have orange between the shadow and the highlight. You're going to have more of this soft kind of violet. And then down in the hands, if the light comes that far, it's going to be a similar thing that, because the fingers are a little more translucent, that you might get a little show through of color down there. And of course, that light, you could decide how far it comes down. You can turn that on and off and see how maybe that would affect down there. Awa says, thank you for the critique. I must sleep now. We'll watch the rest tomorrow. All right, Awa. Well, thank you for joining. I'm glad you were happy with the critique, and I look forward to seeing what the changes are that you put in. Yes. Oh, no, I'm not trying to talk to you. Go away. Okay, so that is edge light. And if you do have that edge light, you can more effectively get away with adding a bit more vibrance and saturation. I just used a vibrance layer set here. Just pushed up the vibrance to like 50, 30 on the saturation, and it's just added to the skin area. So I can flip it on and off, and you just see the skin punches up a little bit more with color. Yeah, and then a little bit more blue color in the cloth. So if you go that route. Next up, number 4. I'm not finding this real effective. The change here with the fins. The fins aren't really working. Like, they're not enough to be effective as fins. The scales is one thing. Scales are more effective, and you kind of have that on here as well. You might even show like a little scale effect kind of going on the neck. So it's continuing out through the whole body area and not just the limbs. So I'd probably add a little bit along there, maybe a slight indication of gills, but it's not something real abrupt because the rest of this is very subtle. But yeah, those are feeling really lacy, and either really say them and put them in there and make them bigger and effective part of the anatomy or the biology, or let's just get rid of them. Number 5. This one is not a real big issue. I lived on Kauai for a while, and I watched the waves, and waves don't behave quite like this, where these are coming in and they're forming this pattern, they're forming these colors. So yeah, that's good, that looks accurate, but they're too narrow. Each one of these is really skinny, and that's not what it's going to do. I feel like you've got a reference of an entire beach and you scrunched it down. So
this is going to be more of a line. What we want to do is start combining some of these together. So you don't have as many verticals going this way like that. And like this is all going to be one. That goes all the way. It might break around that rock, in which case you might, you know, get a different push right there around that rock. But you're not going to have as many individual little bits. Not in this smaller area. It's basically, this is just going, that's one wave right here. And you're treating it as if there's, you know, 5 little waves in this one little spot. And I would just simplify that. Make sure we don't have a bunch of little waves, and that should be more effective that way. What else? I think that's about all I had. This is working really well for me. It's a beautiful image. It's been well handled, and small changes, mainly with the size. Let's just not be afraid of letting things get bigger as they get to the camera, especially with this foreground piece, if you want to get him a good deal bigger. They're muted enough that I don't think that they're muted in tone and value enough that they don't really distract, so I won't worry about that. Very good, beautiful piece, and I appreciate you sending it in. Any comments to address? No, okay. Bass is up next, and we'll pull over and look at this. Wasn't able to work on this challenge as much as I hoped due to the other work I had to attend to. Still want to show you what I got. And if you guys, you know, join the challenge and you don't end up completing the image, send in what you have. That's exactly right. It's better to get some input than none. So make use of the opportunity, send it in. I improved a lot with the perspective, which was my main goal for this challenge since it's my weak spot. So, this was their initial concept right here. Pull it over, you can take a look at it. And we talked about the perspective not being quite accurate and really needing to get that correct, and also making sure what the main focus of the image was going to be, that there wasn't really one standout bit, or there was also, you could think of it as being multiple things trying to get your attention. So I'm going to agree with you. The perspective is way better, much more believable, much more accurate. But and maybe you just added this in later, but the perspective back here isn't really working in the store. Like this guy isn't matching the same perspective. This guy isn't matching the same perspective. So just make sure you run your perspective lines and make sure that everything in this room is matching the same perspective as your main room. And I like the direction that you did with showing me the shop. So it's very clear that, oh, this is the back room to the shop. And that's cool. And it allows the world to even open up a little bit, which is a good call. But dealing with perspective, part of perspective is volumes. And we're running into an issue with it over here. Let me do that and grab a different brush. So what we have is a barrel. Now we don't see this whole barrel, but I'll assume that he's about like that. Now, the barrel is going to be about the same on each side. Here. So the barrel is something like that. We're kind of thinking about the volume of the barrel. And the volume is where it gets off. Because you have another barrel. Let's just duplicate this guy and make him a little bit larger because he's a little bit closer. And you have another barrel right there. The problem is those barrels are occupying the same space at the same time. And that's not going to work. Because if you think about it, the two tops right here could work. But this barrel, closer barrel, is going to be barreling in, curving into the volume of that back barrel. And this back barrel is curving out towards this barrel. And that they would need to have enough room between them. So you could think about it this way. Let's turn this guy off. Let's think about it like this. If you took the widest point of this barrel and ran it up, then the overall volume of area that it takes up is going to match that same perspective, but at the widest point. So the other barrel can't sit any closer than those two widest radii, or diameter, circumferences, whatever, where they would meet. So that's the closest those two barrels could actually sit next to each other, and to keep that accurate. This is something that you can actually see in a fair number of still life paintings, where like they'll have a table and then they'll have this big vase or pottery thing, and then they'll have another one of them right behind it. And dealing with the perspective, there's no way that those two pottery pieces could actually be next to each other, because they would be curving into the volume of the other one. So that they made it up, because you couldn't get two of those actual objects in that proximity without breaking them. So it's something to watch out for. It's a small thing, but it doesn't come up very much, and it's worth noting just for people to recognize it. Number 4. One of the things that I liked about this is that you went with a unusual roof line, and it gave it a bit more character. And I'm going to suggest you go back to that. You have a lot of variations of how you can do that, but this is very straightforward. This is just a bland rectangle, and we can add more character to the scene by changing that up. Now, I think this works pretty well, so you could consider doing this. And right now, this is very heavy, and it's almost like these lines were all kind of throwing our attention this way. And there's nothing stopping us on this side of the image. We've got all of these goodies. We've got this, this table here, all of this stuff here. We've got the curve of the roof there. We've got these barrels and those steps here, but we don't have anything here kind of keeping us in that corner of the image. So I would consider doing what you did, which is kind of, show a rafter coming there like that. And maybe even this side comes up, right? Like this. That could be a bit more interesting. Or, some rooms it would even run all the way down to the door, right? So it's kind of got this thing going on. And you could have, some rafters across there. So playing with it, or go back to what you had the other time. I still think that would be kind of more interesting, doing it that way. And then maybe you have like a lamp hanging down, or a series of lamps, hanging down or something. Just to break that up, give some interest, a bit more character to that roof line, since it takes up so much of the image. Number 5. Number 5 is this banner in the background. I like the idea of the banner. The symbol is good, but it's kind of what you had on the original, which was you had this device in the background in the dead center of your image, and you still wanted this to be the focal point. So we've got the same sort of thing here, but instead of that device, you have this banner. It's right in the center of the image, and you're still trying to make this the focal point, though. So they're competing against each other. And if something is unique, it gives it more... If something is unique, it gives it more importance. That'd be the right word to say it. And this is unique. He's standing out by himself, and he's in the middle of the image. So we want to do something in order to try to tone that back. Like if there was another banner right here that overlapped it, that alone would, and just, like there's something else here hanging down. So it's just the thing in the back of the group. Now, because he's not unique, then he's not nearly as important, even though he's in the same area. It's now just part of a pattern. And this actually becomes more important in the image. So I would consider doing that, or even if you scaled him up so that he wasn't so perfectly framed by the wall, you kind of put him off center a bit more, and then maybe had just one other one next to him. I mean, that would be good. So that's just something that's kind of catching me a little bit on there. What else? I think this is all working really well. I get the idea. Lamps, inkwells, open books, magical artifact. That's fine. Something else you could do to help kind of break it up is if there was just a little shelf, or another little desk right there. You don't have to have much on it, but just a couple of things. So like the bottom of it's kind of covered up. Again, it makes it less important. Yep. Let's see. Boss says, thanks for the feedback. One question, how do you start adding in color? Well, you got two main choices, overlay and color. So you would just start in a new layer. Say that you set that to color. Now, each one behaves similar in some ways, but a little bit different. You can do a color layer, and it is only going to change the color. Let's grab not red. Red is kind of, it's a bit of an exception. It's only going to change the color of something, but it's not going to change the value, how light or dark it is. However, if I were to make a overlay layer, then the overlay layer is going to do that. Overlay can change the color as well as the value. And it's based on how the two values of the colors interact. If there is an easy way to explain this, if I can remember how to do it. It's like if the color, let me do it this way. If the color that you're painting with is darker than the color that's there, it's like going to add the darks together. It's going to multiply the darks. And so it essentially becomes a color layer with the qualities of a multiply layer, right? It's going to have a color change with a little of a multiplication of the darkness. If the color that you're painting with is lighter than the color that you're going over, then it will change it like a color layer, also with the quality of a screen layer, which is it's adding the lightness together. And so it can be a bit more finicky. If the values are exactly what you want before you add color, then a color layer is all you need. But if you also want to be able to adjust some of the values while you're adding color, then you want to use an overlay layer. And it's still going to just take a little work. I would suggest that if you're doing this, doing like a color layer, then consider using the brush feature here and go in to use color dynamics, set it on, maybe 7 or so for those. Then if I'm going to paint this wall, say some sort of brownish color, then it's going to give me a little variation in there with that. Nope, that's the overlay layer. Here we go. So it'll keep it from being completely flat. And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't do, and they don't utilize that, because you do want some variation added into it. And in this case, like if you're doing these, then I would do, nope, turn like this. Try doing each one of these in its own stroke. And then it's going to change the color per stroke due to your settings. And so it's going to slightly vary each one of these planks of wood in color. I've got this fly flying right around my head. Getting a little annoyed. So there, it starts adding that in. Now that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough to complete it. So you can put in all of your base colors that way, but then you'll want to come back with a normal layer where you go in there and you start adding, actual paints over top of everything and over top of your lines. So maybe you come in here and add, some little highlighter areas where, the bottom sides, and maybe some of these are catching a little light, or, maybe some in the groove. So whatever your detailing is, you'll want to start a normal layer where you can come in here and start adding some of those sorts of details. So, okay, that's good for this one. Thank you for the submission. It's looking good. I hope you'll keep working with it. Very few changes as far as accuracy need to be made, like you're doing, just going into the color stage. Now, I would suggest probably keeping the front part of the store and that back room in two different color schemes. Maybe the front area has more, blue light coming, warm light coming through it, and that back room lit more by just the blue light of that magic orb. And that would have a good dynamic between the two different rooms. Okay, next is Connie. Open Connie's piece here. Now, Connie has the most stylized piece. I really liked seeing your submission, and you've kept with a lot of that stylization. There's still work to do, but I'd like to hear your input before I finish it. Sounds good. I will let you know what I think here. Number one, which I actually have here, but number one is you've done a really good job continuing this and addressing a lot of the things that we talked about. I had mentioned making sure that you had a kind of a different visual shapes or shape language for each element, and I think you're doing that very effectively. The rocks in particular are really neat, sort of natural formation, but also very stylized at the same time. So I don't know what references you found for that, but they're working very well, and that's cool. Same thing with the clouds. Unusual pattern, but it works for this image. So that's neat. As far as where we go next, it's going to be number 2. A couple of things that feel off for me that I would suggest addressing, and that is the legs. If I look at the size of this character, let's grab this. If I look at the size of this character, the legs feel a little small compared to the size of the upper body. She seems like she would be someone that would be extra lengthy and kind of lithe, and yeah, the legs just seem too small. So I copied and pasted that and just made it a little bit bigger, just all of the dress, as you can see, and just scaled it up, and that's basically all. Right. You would need to match that in a little better up here. But I feel like that size fits better with the upper body, or vice versa, making the upper body a little bit smaller to match the lower body. Either way, that would be a bit more accurate. Okay, next is 3. The inclusion of the ship is good, but it feels a bit more like a toy ship than a full-size ship. And I think if we were to add more planes between us and the background ship, we would more easily buy that it's further in the background. So if we had a wave here, and then we had another wave that it was overlapping there, and another wave that was overlapping here, another wave behind that one, and then we had the ship behind that one, then it feels like there's more distance between us. And that would be a fairly minor change because you can still keep what you have. It's just kind of moving it up a little bit and adding some more waves underneath it. And just making sure each one is overlapping the next one to give that depth illusion. Number 4. I think that the hair design and shape that you had initially was better. I don't know that I can really explain why I like it better, but I copied and pasted the old one in there. I feel like this is more dynamic, and maybe it's because of the way that you're handling these curves, that this has a nice like sharpness here, and it's really wide, and then it goes to very thin. I feel like this has more motion to it. And again, it's like it elongates on the end and then it thins up, where the current one doesn't have that as much. And it'd be more like if this came back and then it had that kind of back pull to it, where that was allowed to be thin. And then again, lengthened out on the ends and kind of pulled back. I just feel like the original one had more dynamic curves to it. And also the angle maybe was a little better. I keep turning on the wrong one. So that is not wrong there. Trying to talk and do it at the same time. So consider that, whether you want to maybe modify the current one or whether you want to go back to your original. So that's up to you. Now, next is talking about 4, 5. Oh, 5 is the wave. So this is getting a bit fuzzy. I know that you were looking at this, and that only looks that way because they used a camera with a specific setting where it caught it over time, sort of thing. And it's not really working. It just looks fuzzy rather than neatly stylized. I think that you could just use some better shapes in here and find a good shape language for the tops of these to give the form of the waves rather than just the fuzziness. Personally, yeah, I think that would be more effective because everything else has this nice sharpness to it and these very defined shapes, but then you just get the waves and they're just fuzzy. So consider adjusting those. And number 6 is the style. Just going forwards with the piece, I think the overall style and execution of the image is a little unset. All right? And you could go very stylized with it, or you could go very realistic with it. Now, I feel like maybe some of it you're taking too realistic. And I pulled, it reminded me of some of these other images, and I would just note some of this. Like, this is a beautiful piece. It's very stylized, but it has plenty of realism in it. The stylization is that they've really played around with the values. So the eyes are kept very soft. Not a lot of darkness here. Not a lot of darkness here. They just put darkness right over that thing that they, the olive branch, I guess is what it is, I'm guessing. And so it remains textural, but the drawing is very accurate. It's the execution, the values, and the colors that they took a lot of liberty with. Down here, it's similar in that the drawings and the values are actually fairly realistic, but the overall shapes it forms is not. So they use a very strong silhouette and very strong shape language to the exterior, the contour of it, and then they stylize like the hair. This is very realistic, but the hair is just a pattern. It's just this curvy pattern that goes throughout the whole thing. And so that's a really interesting way. It's a combination of realism with patterns, with shapes, and the whole thing has this nice stylization to it. So over here, you might think about that. Like, how realistic do you want to go? Do you want to go realistic with your lights and your colors and your shadows? Or do you want to go realistic with, the actual anatomy and the cloth, but the values and the colors are more, free? So just some ideas of how you can take it. And I just want to suggest that you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. You don't have to do what I do. Do what's best for the image. Do what you like. But whatever kind of theme or approach or style that you find, figure out how to do it well. Don't use it as a cop-out. Some people use it as a cop-out. Don't use it as a cop-out. Figure out how you can do it and get a lot out of it. So it adds to the image and it doesn't use it as a cover-up. I don't think that's what you're doing. Just, I see people do that occasionally. Just a warning. So, okay, very good there. Wrap that one up. Any comments? Let's see. I think I'm going to catch up. Got some people going to bed. I understand it. Thank you for everyone who's staying up late, especially those overseas. Really, I appreciate it. Thank you. Jesus Miza says, first time here, I'd like to ask, how does this work? I mean, can anyone join the challenge? Incredible submissions. I'm thinking you guys are answering your question during the chat, but let me go ahead and answer it in case anybody's actually watching and they had that same question. Then this is a ticket challenge, which means there will be a limited number. There will be 12 tickets, digital tickets, and they will be items for sale on my store on Gumroad, gumroad.com/swatches. They should go on sale tomorrow. And then if you purchase one of those, which I think they've been for $15, I might push them to $20, then you will get reviewed during the concept live stream, which will be in 2 weeks, as well as the final live stream, which will be 2 weeks after that. So you have 4 weeks to complete the challenge. You will be provided an outline of what you're doing, such as they were giving this one. I will write a new one up for the new challenge. And you will be given some reference images, and you will be given a text document with links of where to upload your image and when the deadline for the upload is. Then you will just want to open up the template once you create your image, and then you will follow the video that explains how to use that template. You will drop in all of your images, and then you will send it in as a JPEG. And then during the live stream, I will open it up and I will review it and try to go over what I see as the usually about 5 major points on the image. and I'll try to address whatever question you put in to the text area if you want to throw me a question at the same time. Now, if you also, if you want to get more feedback, or if you want other opportunities or ways to contact me and get feedback from me, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/swatches. The top tier patrons at the $40 level also get feedback videos. Those usually run 30 minutes, 35, 40 minutes, somewhere in that range. And you can submit any image that you want to me in those. There is a limited number out there. And I also have the, oh, I forgot to put that, actually, I was going to put that on the list over here. If you want to have a one-on-one video consultation with me, then you can go to, let's see, consultations at artmentor.com. You can go to artmentor.com and schedule one on my Calendly page. One of the things that I need to do actually today or tomorrow, probably tomorrow, is I'm going to go open up more dates available for that. I had cleared it up to this week, and then I didn't open up anymore. But I'll go open up some more dates. It should be on Tuesdays and Wednesdays during the afternoon, my time. And you can schedule a either 30-minute or 1-hour consultation, and we can go over whatever you want to. Send me some images, ask me questions during the live, the video chat with me, and that's all private. So that's not on air with everybody else. All right, hopefully that addresses it. Matt says, hey, Swatches, sorry I missed off on the sketches. I did include them last week on Facebook, but I think I was still too late. I should have included them with the final, but preparing for an 85-mile walk broke me. Dang, 85 miles? I might walk that in 6 months or a year, certainly not at one time. Good luck with that if you haven't done it. I hope you have a killer pair of shoes. I totally understand life does get in the way, and hey, it happens. Do what you can. I'm not here to give you a hard time, man. So don't worry about it. Okay, Connie's next up. Jokislava. Forgive me if I don't say that right. I'm not familiar with that name. So, all right. I was going to throw this up here. This was the original concept that was submitted 2 weeks ago. They did use a 3D model program to mock up this scene, and then bringing it over to Photoshop and painting the rest of it up from there. This really allowed them to get accuracy on all of the angles, perspectives, volumes, and the rest. So I think that was very well done and well executed on that regard. So very good to see that. And we're going to start by taking a look at the comments down here. It says, I got stuck on that blue thingy in the middle. Yeah, this image is still a work in progress. It's not technically finished, even though this is the finished submissions. It was supposed to be something mysterious, like that the Enchanter is figuring out, but this doesn't feel right. Also, I would like to ask if you have any advice how to practice telling stories in illustrations. And the note here is time. When I'm thinking about a scene that needs to do something in a narrative way, that is much too big. Where is my, Yep, somewhere about there. That's better. The main thing that I think of when I think of conveying some sort of narrative of what is going on with this scene is time. That's the biggest thing with narrative. So you need to show them somehow a flow of time. A, and then B, then C, then D, and let them follow through the clues on the image to reach the conclusion of what's going on. So it's kind of like leaving breadcrumbs or giving clues on a map, to what's going on. So in this case, brainstorming, if you wanted to convey that this was a mysterious object that they were trying to figure out, then how could you do that? I would think of what is other ways to get people to understand that visually, that they had to go find it. How can I show that they were going and trying to find this thing? Back here, I would get rid of the chalkboard, and then, or I would at least change it so that the chalkboard was like those things that you see in the movie. So there's a map up here. This would be a map. Then there's going to be some other photographs and drawings that are pinned to the wall. And maybe another one overlapping it up there. And you've got a map of some island. Maybe you see some other little islands over here. Maybe it's like a volcanic island. You kind of see a little topography there. And you have, latitude, longitude sort of thing going on. And then, like they do in the movies, strings and lines. So you have a sketch of what he thinks this thing was supposed to look like. Then you have a note by somebody that they wrote. Then you tie a string here, and here you see 3 X's on the map. And you have a pin sticking out of one of these X's. And you have 2 strings leading to that X, and then a string from somewhere off camera, going over there. And then you show 2 of those X'd out, and maybe a circle around one of them. Then a handwritten note of, something about that one. Then some more strings leading to a pin over here. So it immediately gives the concept that this is something, this is what they were looking for, whatever was down here in these notes. And they've been looking multiple places for it. There was a specific location that they had to go to try to find it. Then that's one clue. What other clues can we give them? And it's like a little mystery, right? We're trying to leave clues for them so they can put these pieces together. Down here, we're going to have a book that has a drawing of this thing in it. And it's going to have that, and then it's going to show it in the open, which you kind of have here, but you might want to have more, I'm going to say sticky notes, right? He's got other bits of paper and notes put in there, like he's adding in his own notes to this published thing. And then we want to see drawings of it, so he's studying it. And the markings that you see on the outside, you see the markings here. Then you see him breaking the markings down into individual pieces. So he's deciphering it. And you see him have some pages of him deciphering the clues there. I also think of like dissecting something. So think of it like if you're dissecting some sort of organism. So in this case, he might have some other device here that's up here, has a little arm coming down, and it's holding back the sides. He's got like another little device on this side, and you can see it's holding this thing open, right? Or maybe it's tied down. It has a little weight pulling it down. And so there's that. And then there is a magnifying glass on a stand that comes from over here. And it has several different lenses that it can have pulled over it. It has a little gear here for the lenses. So he's obviously been examining it. Right? Those put together would say, okay, cool. So he learned of this thing's existence. He's been trying to find it for an extended period of time. He's looked in multiple locations. He's putting a variety of clues together as far as its location. And now he has a book that says something about it. Now here it is. And he's opened it up and he's slowly, carefully examining it. He's using examining tools like, microscopes or magnifying glasses. He's deciphering the information on it. That would all work. So that's what I'm thinking of is time. How can you convey what happened at various points of time throughout this process? All right. Let's talk about the execution, the painting of this particular image. Pull up a little bit. Number 2, talking about the X and the dissecting. That was all part of it. Yeah, lighting. Let's talk about the lighting and then the color. So lighting-wise, I don't know exactly what you're wanting to go for. It feels like there is light coming in from, I'm going to say, a window coming across this area. But I think it would be more effective if it was actually stronger. I think it would just work better. It would give you better values. It would give you a more pop of color. So what I did is I created a exposure layer and I masked it like this. So the whole thing, if I were to do this and delete layer mask, so now it brightens everything up, but then I made the mask on it and then I blacked out the mask so it wasn't affecting anything. Then you can go in and paint with white the areas that you want the sunlight to hit. And that's what I did here. So very quickly, just boom. Now that there is a light, of course, you need to be thinking about how the cast shadows work, right? It's like, okay, this is going to cause the cast shadow to go over onto this thing. So that's going to be like that. This is going to have a cast shadow. There's going to be cast shadow from this thing. Actually, that might be a little bit bigger depending on the angle. That has a cast shadow. And just watching, like, this is going to have a cast shadow across that page. Things flat to it probably won't catch the light, that area. And then think about how far that light goes. And then the further the light travels to hit something, the fuzzier the edge is going to be. So, yeah, you probably have a fuzzier edge along that edge over there. But it's going to be sharper here because it hasn't traveled as far to cast that shadow. So that is an exposure way. Now, that's not perfect, but that's going to give you a good basis for creating that distinction between the two. Layers, the levels here. Like with the brass, I think you could probably pop up the values on the brass a little more contrasty. Like down here, if I turn that on and off, you feel that feels more matte. And matte, brass is not matte. It's very contrast. So if we punch that up, it behaves more like brass. So that is another quick way that you could just get more of that metallic feeling to it. So adding those on there. And then color-wise, I think we need to narrow the color scheme a little bit. We're getting a bit too broad in that we have bright blue, bright red, bright yellows, we've got greens, we've got violets. We just have the whole spectrum, and that doesn't allow anything to really stand out. And so let's try to create a little more color harmony, and then that will allow the blue to actually stand out more. So this worked really well here, is that it has a lot of color and a lot of pop of color, but it's primarily like brown tones and red. And there's subtly green on the brass, and there's some grays, and there's some, slightly over to the violet side on some of the reds, but it has a very cohesive color scheme. Same thing with this. There is different colors of wood, there's cloth, there's white paper, but it has a cohesive color scheme. So for yours, I added a color layer, and I pushed it towards the violet side. And there's not a right or wrong decision there. I mean, it could be, you could take it other directions. All right. But I sort of liked the way that the violet and the blue were close enough without competing. And so the standouts that really needed to be changed were this red book. We have bright yellows back here. The green was kind of a by himself sort of thing. So you have violets and kind of red violets. And then the blue, he's the only real blue. And moving away from the yellows and the oranges, like on those guys. So consider kind of what colors you want to maybe sync up and make a little more harmonious. I know that this is a work in progress, so a lot of the textural stuff, the aging stuff, like patinas, finer things like that, I'm going to assume that you can do those, or you're at least going to get to them. So I'm not giving you time on that. You can handle that. As much as you've already got done, I think you have a good direction. So it looks good. And make sure that you post the finished image on the Facebook group. I'd like to see how it turns out. Matt, you are up. Matt did not use a template. Yeah, what were you doing, Matt? You didn't send me the sketch, which I get. Hey, things get busy, something comes up that day. But then you had time and still didn't send me the template with the sketches in it. Just a reminder to everybody, if you do join the challenge, please use the template, because I will be able to help you more if I can see the way that you handled sketches, the way that you went through value studies, color studies, what your references were. The more of that information that I have, the more that I can more effectively give you feedback. So it's not just I'm trying to be hard on you or make it more difficult for you, but I will actually be able to help you more if I have, that to look at. So first up is the idea works, right? This is another one that the bones of the image work. The concept is good. Is it super creative? No, I mean, as a standard composition, I mean, there's nothing outstanding about it, but you don't have to. A lot of people think that they have to get super fancy with the composition, the angle that you're viewing it. No, you don't. Even a straightforward composition, a standard eye level can be some of the best images if you just handle the character design well, if you handle the lighting well, if you handle the painting, the values and the colors and those sorts of things well. That can all come together for great images. I was looking at some of the images by Brahm, and he doesn't usually get very fancy with his compositions or eye levels or any of that, but he has some really strong images. That's because he nails everything else, and he realizes a lot can be done with just those. So on this one, let's walk through some of the points. Number one, I already mentioned that, template. Two is eye level. Again, eye level strikes. So some of this stuff in the image works together for the eye level. Eye level is horizon line. The horizon line, eye level are always the same thing, unless you're not on Earth. If you're outside of Earth atmosphere, then that will not be true. But there you go. As long as you're on Earth, the horizon will be eye level, which is about here, because this is curving up. Then the ocean is horizon line is going to be a little above that, and we look like we're about eye level with her. So somewhere in this region. Now that's fine and that works. And the waves, okay. But we're looking, this is different. Now this is telling me that you took this, either, it looks like you got a photo and manipulated it, which if you want to do photo bashing, that's your call. But only do photo bashing if the perspectives match, and they don't in this case. So photo bashing is a perfectly acceptable way to do an image. Certainly generally more for concept art than finished illustration. Finished illustration, in my opinion, should be more hand painted and less photo bashed. But you have to make sure the perspective and the lighting is the same, and it isn't. So, and that goes to everybody. And just something to be aware of, you have to have the perspective to match, and you have to have the lighting direction and qualities to match. That is the lighting, where's the lighting coming from? Does it match the rest of the image? As well as its intensity and its color. So in this case, we are looking at this, and the horizon line of this is down here. We're actually looking up at these skulls, and we're looking flat on these, straight at this, as if none of this existed, and we were just eye level right here. So you can see that you're going to have to repaint this. None of this matches the perspective of the rest of the image. You can use this as the idea of how the things are laid out, but you need to paint these in the perspective matching everything else. So imagine that these, they have to stretch out horizontally, right? Let's run some lines to kind of explain that. This was a 3D model I built from the skulls, but you're right, it needs adjusting. Yeah, well, if we look here and run perspective lines, so the horizon line is here-ish, and we run perspective lines. The ground is moving at this angle. It is retreating. Now, I'm just guessing where these horizontal ones go. I'm not going to take the time to work them all out. But it's going to be something like that. So we're going to get the skulls, and the skulls have to fit, and you know, the ribs or whatever, they've got to fit in here, matching this perspective. I mean, you can imagine if these were cubes, right? They have to match that perspective. And then we get the impression also that this is getting too flat. All right? So this is one perspective. Now, you could also adjust it by trying to match the perspective to something else, in which case the perspective and a horizon line could be moved down here. And that would actually fix or make things a lot more consistent, but you would need to move all of the background to have perspective with a horizon line down here. Oh, I meant to put that on a different layer. So then, now you have right, now that's your horizon line. And you're basically looking up at her. Now you need to adjust the the curves a little bit. So we have more of the up angle to some of this. Her head could be tilted down, so maybe her face wouldn't even need to be adjusted too much. But that would keep her and the foreground more accurate. But yeah, we just got two different perspectives going on, two different horizon lines. Okay, next up is number 3. Let's get rid of that. Number 3 is style, and that comes a bit from, some of this is hand painted, some of this is, I guess you said, based on a 3D model. Some of it looks like maybe it's photo-ish elements, like the waves look like maybe they started out as a photo or based on the colors of photo or something. Anyway, the style is sort of all over the place, and I'm going to suggest finding a good piece of art that has a style that you want to follow, or pick a piece of the image that you want it to follow. Like, you have this black outline around a lot of these different features, but you don't carry it to the background. So there's like black lines around this and a lot of this, but not any of this. And it makes it just doesn't match. So the painting styles don't match. And you have like high level of detail and realism in some stuff. The other stuff is just kind of a bit more abstract. So let's now say this is the ingredients, but now we need a consistent, kind of taste throughout the whole thing. Now we need to go back and paint everything so it has a consistent look. And that consistent look is up to you. I don't know what you want. Number 4, a bit of just composition thing, is we have lightning basically coming up here and making this shape, head coming up here and making this shape, this rock coming up here and making this shape, and then we just have this line. And it's very clearly stuff, no stuff. And that compositionally doesn't work too well. So let's try to adjust that. And, if this is lightning, then just let the lightning, come down here. Also, the lightning has a bit of that object shyness, right? So, this is, lightning's over here by himself. She's here by herself. And then the rock is over here by itself. And nobody really, wants to mess with anybody else. So it's not difficult. I mean, you get the lightning, you can expand its size and let it take up more of this area. Maybe even let it, go across to the halfway point. And then maybe this rock gets to start behind her a little bit more, so we have more overlapping. And then it doesn't end at the exact same level, so you sort of split the difference. This one comes from off canvas, and then you have this, and then you have the rock kind of in between on the other side. And that would be more well balanced. Okay. I think that was supposed to be 5. 5, character design. Character design is sort of like the image overall in that it's got mixed, kind of a mixed ideas. I feel like this is a stage where you put in a lot of ideas, but now you need to massage them into its own thing. I talk about it in the painting process video where there is kind of a curve to the way that an image is made, where for a long time it's just component pieces. I've used the analogy before, I'll use it again, of a car. Wheels are not a car. A seat is not a car. A steering wheel is not a car. An engine is not a car. They're just parts. But if you put enough parts together, it becomes a car. It kind of becomes more than the sum of the parts. And in a similar way, with an art piece, you start adding in more ideas, more subjects, until you fill in the canvas with all the stuff that you want. But then what you have to do is like release your grip a little bit of the image direction. And you see how these all are fitting together. And then you let it start moving that way. So it's saying, okay, I like the octopus tendrils, but I don't really see how that's consistent with this. So can I go further with that? And it's kind of figuring out, how is this all going to work, right? And allowing the image to find what its direction is and following that. So with her, I do the same thing, right? This isn't something that that's unusual, and I think I go over this in the flamethrower night, the combustion night video, and that is where I designed up like 5 different kinds of armor styles on the same night. And then when I went back to refine it, I figured out which style I liked the best and which one was the most coherent to the overall idea. And then I modified the rest to follow that. So that's the same way here. I think this works really well. This is cool. Gives you great shapes. There's good movement. And mimics, the hair curves. But then we get seashells, here. Like, okay. But instead of that, then we also get part of her body becomes these things. Then in addition to that, she's got this patterning. Then she's got this other color of fin thing. And then she has scales. It's just getting to be too much. Right? So let's back off on how many. We have fewer ones, but we make them more consistent across the whole character. My thought would be here, instead of this thing, we get more of this. And this fly just, for some reason, thinks my arm is the best place to land on in this whole room. So here, just let this come down into more tendrils. And let it behave as if it's flowy fabric. So it doesn't need to be all up in our face and flying around. Just let it be doing all of its normal curves and just kind of coming down like this. And just as a second read, you realize that it's, similar kinds of tendrils coming down. And either go with scales or go with the patterns, the stripy stuff. I think the stripy stuff works better because scales and the tendril are kind of like different kinds of biologies. Like octopus don't have scales, fish have scales, and fish don't have tendrils. So you're combining kind of 2 different kinds of biologies along with the human. So I would drop the scales out and just continue with some sort of your patterning on the legs there. That alone would probably help quite a bit, just making it a bit more consistent with idea across the rest of it. Mm-hmm. This net, though, that's a pretty good idea. Using it like a shawl, I like that. So I hope you'll stick with that. Anything else? Lighting. Lighting is another one here where it's inconsistent. Overall, kind of, we need to figure out what the actual lighting is here. Because some of this has this fairly strong light, this top-down light. But the face is lit from the front, really. There's not a consistent light direction here. So we need to figure out what the light direction is and make sure that the whole scene, I accidentally grabbed that. The whole scene is using that direction. I did find, that was that other one. This image by Brahm came to mind, and it had some of the same things that you've got here, even some of the same colors. So the foreground has got these darker elements, the background much further back in the background, and it's more subdued. It still has great pops of color, but you can see that it works really well. Very strong shapes. Yours has strong shapes. So you can pull out and kind of compare the two of these together. So you can imagine that if this adopted this sort of value scheme where she was allowed to be either distinctly lighter or distinctly darker than the other one. So like if you were to inverse that. That didn't work. Some of them you can, they work well. But if you had had more of this value scheme so that this was clear, really good shapes. You do have good shapes here. I think that's one of the ties together. And he doesn't have it's not super realistic, right? I mean, you can look at it. It's not like this is a photograph. It's obviously very illustrated. And the lighting, it's just that each area has a very distinct value range and color range. So you can look at the body, and the area that down here might actually realistically be getting darker than that. He just keeps within the value range. Likewise, the stuff that is well lit is not being blown out. It's continuing to have nice skin tone. And the metal isn't having this bright specular sheen. So, I think getting some cues from this, bringing them over to yours, would be a good call. All right, that's it on this one, Matt. Hopefully you, get something out of that, and it gives you some ideas where to go moving forwards. Oh yeah, Toby. Hopefully I didn't overly influence you. I know I just came up with the idea of running with the cats for the image. But I think this is a better image than what you had. I think this is a more intriguing image than what you had. So I like this direction. No comments on this one, so we won't be addressing anything there. So we're just going to be looking at the image. We have some sort of magic Enchanter shop, and he's got all of his ghost cats, which I'm a fan of. So what can we learn from this, and what can we take into account here? Number one is level of detail. Now this comes up a lot when you're dealing with photo elements. The photo elements are almost always going to have a far higher level of visual information and detail than the painted areas. So it's automatically going to make this big division between the two. So like this is painted. This is hand drawn. It's very evident that that is hand drawn. It's very evident that this is a photo. And what we want to do is find a way to mesh the two of these together so that the whole thing is a nice piece of artwork and not just a collage of different things. So something, if you're using photos, is say that we get this. I'm going to copy and paste that onto its own layer. And then I'm going to run not sharpen, blur. Run a surface blur. So you can see how that's affecting it next to the other ones. That what I'm trying to do is lower the amount of visual noise and detail so it gets closer to the level that you're going to get from your paint. And you should have the same level of visual detail from both elements. Smart blur might give me better results. I don't do this real often. I forget which one gives you better results. Yeah, even that's better. So we can pull in here, we can see that it removes a lot of the finer detail. It sort of averages things out. That probably still could be averaged out even more. And what you could come in here and do is just hand paint some of these. Go over them, try to remove just the super photo quality and randomize it up a little bit, add some brush strokes in here, get rid of all the super high level of visual information. And then you can get that and copy and paste that multiple times. And so you really only have to paint the area 1/2 time, because the original painting is going to do a lot of the layout, the shapes, the template that you're going to be drawing, and then you paint over it kind of once, just pulling out some little stuff like this. Just spend a little while going over it. Give each book just a couple little, brush strokes, pull out some little edges here or there. And so like this right here, that would be good. This area right there. And then you can get that. And then you would go and you could do like copy and paste, and then maybe even like, transform and like, flip it horizontally so they're all going the same direction. Or you start, mix matching them. So you grab that part and maybe you put it on this side or whatever. So you come up with some variations of it based on one little section that you do. And that's going to make it all painterly, and that's going to be good. Other places like this, it's obvious that this was a photo crystal. So what you want to come up here and do is you want to kind of paint over it and create your painted version of this same thing. And you can still use all the same lighting patterns, all the same colors, but we need it in brush strokes instead of just photo. Again, too high level of detail. Same thing down here. It's like this is all painted and it doesn't work with the high level back here. The kitties are also kind of running into that. The kitties are super realistic and well detailed in their little faces. And we probably want to adjust that. So, coming in here and painting some of this, maybe creating slightly different patterns and playing with this. Coming in here with a blur tool, and not just blurring the edges, but blurring some of the, that is not the right tool. I'm blurring some of the rest of the details. I'll lower them. But ideally, you should run something like that smart blur on all of your photo elements before you put them into your scene. So just lower that amount of visual noise and information and then put them into your scene, and they'll fit much better. Okay, number 2. You've got to work with the perspective here. That the perspective is off. The perspective is accurate, but they're not accurate as a whole. Each area is accurate to itself, so it's not consistent overall. Like this establishes the eye level is somewhere here. And that it's ambiguous because things don't really follow to a particular eye line, so maybe it's even higher than that. So it's somewhere there, but this isn't matching it. See, we're looking straight at all of this. We're not looking down on it. And if there was a bowl there and it was that far under our eye level, then we're going to be seeing a lot more of the top of that bowl, right? It's going to be more like that, not this. So you have, this right now, and then it needs to be more like that. So we're looking down. Same thing with all these other jars. If we're looking down that much on them, then all of these jars are going to have more tops visible. They're all going to have more curve like this instead of being flat across. So if you haven't studied perspective, and I'm getting the impression you probably haven't, then go watch my Art Fundamentals perspective episode. And I walk through that. Go pick a book on perspective, watch another video on perspective. It's not a terribly difficult thing to understand and to pick up, but it is something that is going to be crucial for bringing believability into your images. So make sure you study, you understand how those work and how to check them in your images. And it's the same thing that I told on the previous image. Any photo elements that you use, you need to make sure that they match the perspective of your scene. For instance, on these, you would want to make sure that you're looking up at the books over your eye level and looking down on these books. So if your eye level is here, then these books are fine. This area right here is fine. But because this is under your eye level, we should be seeing the tops of these books. And then because you're looking up at these, we should see the bottom side of that shelf on all of those. So make sure you check all of that, run those lines, make that accurate. And the lighting. Right now, you have all the elements, you have all the objects in there, but the lighting hasn't been determined yet. You do have some candles, which is kind of the lighting, but there is a light on the rest of this, and it's undetermined where it's coming from. So we need to figure that out, determine where it is. It's up to you. You get to decide where it is. If it's a top light, maybe that there is a lamp just out of view, in which case we need to make sure that things are following that. Let's see, I'm going to do an exposure. This is just a cheap way to mimic a light effect. All right, I'm not saying that this is the end-all way of how you should do this. But the top of the desk, light. The side, not. Right now, there's not really too much of a distinction between the two. This is facing up at the light, so light. This is a sphere, basically, so light on the top of that. This curves out on the arch there. Here, catches light there. Here, that curves in, so that won't get any light. That has a cast shadow. I can pull up, see that a little better. That's going to have a cast shadow under it because that light's coming down. Then I'll have a cast shadow there and there. Catch these pages. Now that is not, we're looking at anything facing up at the light, and we're trying to brighten it up. And that's facing up. That's facing up. That's not. Now this is, all right? This is going to have some light on it, depending on the form of this thing. Just exactly how that's going to be catching light, but something like that. Now this could give you the basis to work from, and like I said on the other one, you'll need to go back and properly paint how all that works. This is all facing up as well. Maybe the ghost cats, have some, some thickness to them, so they can block light a little bit, so they don't get too washed out there. And then the crystal is going to be catching some light on that top. Maybe he brightens up a little bit. Tops of this little shelf is going to be catching some light. Yeah. Okay, so that takes care of sort of this area. But then we need to come in here and do some light, dealing with kitty. Perspective, light. Okay, that was just part of the light. So the cats, right now you just kind of have this light fuzz of green light around them. But let's try to step away from that. Let's go from just ambiguous, soft, fuzzy light around them to thinking about how the light is actually affecting the forms. So this is what I call painting light. This is what people try to do. They paint the light itself. Don't paint the light itself. You really need to do that. What you want to do is paint the thing being lit by the light. So in this case, let's grab some of this green, and it's going to be lighting this. Okay. He's going to be casting light on that. Might be a little bit on the side of this. All right. So this guy, instead of just fuzziness around him, what's he going to be lighting? Well, he's going to be catching this. Now this is where you have to understand the 3D forms and how everything is three-dimensionally, angling towards each other so that you can get the a realistic way that this is lit. And you have to think about these books, right? And the books have a slight curve on the edge. So, like this. And some of these might be catching light, the little ribs on the sides. This book back here might even be catching a little light from him. And because our view is in the middle, we're going to see the inside of this a little bit. So we can see the inside of that being caught by the light, but there will be a cast shadow from that book on it, so it won't be all of it. And this sort of approach needs to be taken with all of your light sources, right? All of your kitties, all of this, like there's a green, this is glowing green, which means that it's going to be casting light on the surface here. Might have a little edge light right there. This looks like it might be glowing a little bit, which means that it's going to be throwing some light in there. This is very bright and blue, so it's probably going to be throwing some blue light up here. Okay, so that's the sort of approach. That's where you're going to bring in a lot of realism, and it's going to tie all of this together. When you start having the light of one thing actually affecting the color and the light of something else, not just with a haze, but working out the actual angles and the planes of it and lighting it that way, it's going to become far more believable. Then when you work with the details like we did up here, it's going to just pull this whole thing together, having a consistent light source over each area. Then yeah, it's going to just step it up. So I'm looking forward to seeing you taking that and bringing it all together. It's the right way to say it. Thomas. Okay. Thomas, did you submit a sketch? Because I don't remember this. Oh, okay, yeah. You say, I moved from my first concept because I realized it was wasn't matching initial requirements. What should I focus on now to become a better artist? Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Toby. I'm glad you liked it. Hopefully you got your money's worth. Okay, notes. Yeah, notes. We're just going to talk about this first. So less about talking on the image on this one and more just answering this question, because I think that is the more pertinent question. What should I focus on to become a better artist? That takes precedence over just how can we improve this singular piece. And I can answer that better because you have plenty of these sketches and some of your studies and stuff here. So looking at it, there's several things that I will suggest. And right now I can tell that you are more thinking in terms of lines than you are forms. As you're thinking in a more shape, two-dimensional way and less in a three-dimensional way. And also your observation skills. So the two things that I'm going to want you to focus on, if you were just my student and I could sit you down and make up my own program for what I would have you to do to improve, is there's two things that I want to base it on, and that is improving your observation skills and helping you think in terms of forms rather than lines. So let's talk about observation skills. Observation is something that is not talked about enough. And that is an artist's ability to be able to look at something and be able to recognize its accuracy or inaccuracy. It is also the artist's ability to look at a subject and know what information is relevant, what information is not relevant, and how to handle that information. Because if I looked at this, say that we're both going to paint this face, we can be working from the same face, but I guarantee you I'm paying attention to different information in that than you are. And that comes from observation skills. As you progress as an artist, you learn what information is important and what to do with that visual information. So it's kind of like what you have is a machine, and that's your mind. And every machine has its effectiveness, efficiency. And what we want to do is make your machine more efficient. So we can give it the same information and give it the same goal, but it's going to give you better results with it. And right now, I think that your eye is not as sharp as it could be in their observation skills. You're getting things off a little bit. Like I'm looking at your sketches, the anatomy, the angles, some of these things are off, and you're not catching it. And so that's why we need to improve the observation skills. Get it to where you can instantly tell when angles and forms and shadows don't match. So that breaks down to the draftsman part, which is getting all of the placement and the sizes accurate. Then we want to think about the tones, like is the color right? Is the value right? And for that, one of the best studies I'm going to suggest, go back to your pencils, all right? Let's step away from digital for a little bit. Let's go back to the old school pencils and do some cast drawings. Now, there's some, wherever I grabbed this from on Google, that's their website. And here's an example of a cast drawing. Now, this is a cast. It's a plaster cast. And this guy's doing a charcoal graphite drawing of it. And the idea of these is to be as precise as humanly possible. You want to replicate it as perfectly accurate as you can. And you also notice that this is not about using lines. This is about using tones. That's a value tone. It's not a line. You start out with lines in order to get something very accurate, and then you move into tones. So this would be great for you because it's going to really sharpen your eye as far as making sure everything is very accurate. You glance at yours, you glance at your subject, you glance back at yours, and learn, train your eyes so that you can instantly tell the differences between them. And then you start thinking in tone. This is a tone. They have got all of the shadows, and they've recognized them as separate from every area that is lit, and then they start subdividing that into variations of darkness. It's the same process they used on this one. They just went way finer and with the resolution essentially. So those would be really good. You can go purchase these. I mean, you can order these off of. I think the really good ones you get off of Etsy, etsy.com. There's people that sell some really good ones out there. You can probably buy some maybe from an art store. Amazon carries some, just plaster ones. If you don't have the money to go get some, then a cheap workaround is to do a still life of white fabric. So get some white fabric, crumple it up, maybe, drape it over, I don't know, even just a cup or something, just to give it a little form. then draw that and draw it in black and white and just get all of the angles perfect, get all of the values perfect. And that's going to do a lot to improve your observation skills. Forms. These are going to be some good form studies to take on. So we want to improve your observation skills, and that's good for getting realism out of... Oh, power wanted to shut off there. Okay. Is the stream still going even though the power flickered? It looks like it. Okay. Well, I'll assume that it is. I'm going to be doing some content on this, and I've explained it to some other people. I'll explain it here. There is a division. On this side, you have 2D. On this side, you have 3D. 2D, you have shapes. They have height and width. They have no depth. And then on this side, you have forms. They have height and width and depth. So, that's your difference. Your square to your cube. Now, this side is great for observation. I might even said this last time. I don't care. It's important. People should know it. This side is better for imagination. And the power keeps cutting out, but thankfully, I bought a battery backup for the computer. So anytime the power flickers out, instead of the computer shutting off, it immediately goes to power reserve and the computer stays on. So here we go. This is good for observation, these skills. One is not better than the other. They are simply appropriate for two different things. And you need to be able to do both. Now, this one you learn first. Right? Imagination. This is what you learn first. Just as you grow up, as your brain matures, this is natural. After you learn this, you start learning this. And so if you're going, oh, I don't know how to do this one, I can't do this side very good yet, that's okay, that's normal. Just know that that's where you're going next. And this one is best for observation. Why? Because when you're working from, say, a still life, and you've got a box there, there is a lot of visual information there. Real life has a lot of visual information, far more than you ever really want to paint. So you want to simplify that. And you simplify that by getting complex things and turn them into simpler shapes. It's getting a lot of detail, like thousands and thousands of leaves on a tree, and learning how to turn those leaves into just a shape, a mass of leaves with a single tone. Now, that's great when you're working from complex life or even a detailed photo, but it's terrible if you are wanting to create something realistic from imagination, because it is based on 2D elements. And in order to get something that looks 3D, you need this. You need this side, because the end result has to go to 3D. It has to look 3D, and you're not going to get that by using 2D means. That's what people try to do, though. They use 2D techniques to try to fake a 3D appearance. You're not going to do it. You have to work and understand 3D in order to get realistic lighting and realistic volumes. And that is why you need to understand this stuff for imagination, so that you can build up fictional worlds, fictional characters, fictional scenes, and you do that with your imagination, and then you combine that with the realism of life, and you bring that over for more added believability. So you have to be able to think in 3D terms. Well, there's a storm blowing in. I didn't know there was a storm coming in tonight. Anyway, Anyway, one of these simple practices to get into this is to do this. So sketch a little cube, a cylinder, a pyramid, any little shape like that. And rain is coming in. You can probably hear that on the microphone. So over here, I'm double checking that we actually are continuing this stream. All right. I thought the power there might have flipped out the router. All right, I want to wrap up because it's getting loud in here with the rain. I'm sorry. So get a cube, simple box, and then turn that box, and then redraw it, and then turn it again, almost like you were doing a little flip book. Yeah, think about it as if you were doing a little flip book, and you're doing all of the little variations as it turns around. Only don't have anything to look at. Don't have an object in front of you. And that's the whole idea, is you're teaching your brain how to think in 3D. And you do that with simple shapes first, and then you start making them more complex. And then you get this and you turn it into a car or something. Yeah, this building has a tin roof, and it has no insulation, so you can hear the rain very loud. So doing that sort of thing, just, set aside some practice every day to do that. Those two combined would be excellent. This sort of study would also be great for you right here. That is, go find a photo of somebody, I don't know, go to a figure drawing site, whatever. Find something, and then sketch it like this. Don't copy what you're seeing. You're not doing this. You're not doing a perfect copy. What you want to do is understand the forms of what's going on. So you sketch the volumes and the form of the body, and then start adding contour lines over it. And that will doubly make your mind have to understand what's going on with the volumes. So, another thing that you can do if you want to get into doing more illustrations, and you're like, okay, I've been studying, I've been doing these practices, but now I want to do an actual piece. This one I just grabbed randomly, all right? There's nothing special about this. Is what you can do is get an image. Maybe you look at this one, you go, oh, that's cool. I like the value, I like the simple composition. So I'm going to do a variation of that. That's going to be my inspiration. And now I'm going to do a scene right here where it's going to be my own character. It's going to be a lady. She's going to have long hair. And she's going to be standing in the same sort of pose. Right? So she's going to be standing here, but she's going to have a staff. And she's going to be like a druid or something. And then that'll be here, and she's going to have like these robes, hanging down here. And then on the background, instead of smoke, I'm going to have like roots of a tree. So what this allows you to do is be creative and create your own scene, but without just going off without a guide. And essentially, you allow this to be your guide. You're using the same composition, the same idea for the lighting. Use the same lighting. You light the face the same way, but it's a different face. You light the object the same way, but it's a different object. So in this way, you get to learn about how this image works and why it works without copying it. And that's the big problem with doing master studies. What people end up doing is they just copy the scene, which just teaches them the 2D elements that we looked at. All they see is, oh, gray spot, I'm going to paint a gray spot. A black thing, I'm going to paint a black thing. But they don't learn why it works. And if you create a derivation of it, then you have to understand why it works, because you're interpreting it into a new scene. And then beyond that is where it gets into lighting. And lighting will be the thing, kind of we're talking down here with, it's like, you'll learn the 2D stuff and get into thinking more 3D once you get there. and you get a grasp on all that, you'll get a better idea of how to do lighting. All right, that's how the flow of understanding works. So as you get into understanding this, working this way more, start paying more attention to lighting. It'll start making more sense to you. And so that's one of the biggest things on this image. It has no lighting. Everything is completely flat. And as you're doing these sorts of studies, you'll understand it more as you create derivations or your own takes, based on other images. Then it'll start making more sense, and start doing some lighting studies. And that is going to be a great flow for you. So I'm not really talking about this image. I think that is going to be more important to you. Hopefully you find that useful, and hopefully you'll join in on another challenge. I'd like to see what you come up with after you start those studies. And the last one you're going to wrap up, and it's probably good because I don't know how bad this weather is going to get. Tyler Vale, all right. Now, Tyler down here says, I don't think this piece is a portfolio piece like I was aiming for, but I still learned a lot. Thank you for your great feedback, and let me have it. I think I need to aim for more dynamic question. Tyler, as it is probably with you, not a portfolio piece, do not give up on this image. Do not do that to me, Tyler. I see that too much from other people. Don't do that to me. You push through, you finish this thing. This image right here that you are citing, this is an old image that I did. I did it about 10 years ago. I painted this scene. I was pretty happy with it. It wasn't this version. And I wanted it to be better. It just wasn't quite there. And I forgot what website it was, CG Society or somewhere. Conceptart.org, that's where it was. Back in the day, conceptart.org forum was the place to be. That was, it's not a thing anymore. Don't go out there, it's not a thing. And I put it out there for some feedback, got some excellent feedback. And I was just really pushing my art skills to improve this thing. And I remember pouring over 100 hours into this. It was well over 100 hours. And I would paint it and it wouldn't be right. And I'd paint the area again and it wouldn't be right. And I'd paint it again. And yeah, it's not perfect. Sure, it's not perfect. I tell you what, I learned more from pushing this image than if I had started 5 other images and just kind of half-heartedly did them. So I'm going to suggest push forwards with it. You're always going to get more. Like the water. I learned so much about water painting this and scales, and just this was probably the most complex scene I'd ever painted. So just working with the different angles and poses and stuff. So on this one, it can be better. This is another scene I will say it has good bones, right? This image is not inherently flawed, so I don't think you need to start over. Thomas says, thank you very much. Didn't know how to make progress, and your help was very appreciated. Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you found it helpful. And yeah, that can be one of the biggest things. Just like, I need to know the right direction, or I just need to know if I'm on the right direction. So that's honestly why I do this stream. I remember being younger, and there wasn't much access to getting feedback from working professionals. And I just remember talking to my mom and being like, gosh, I wish there was some way that I could get a hold of someone and just ask for some feedback. And that wasn't a thing. So I always thought, as I get older, I want to be able to do that for somebody else. And I hope you guys will too. I really do. I hope that once you keep working and you get in the industry, that you will turn around and you will start sharing this knowledge and what you've learned with other people. So on this one, good bones, we can just, let's punch up the execution. Let's really do something nice with it. So, oh yeah, you talked about dynamic. I've said it before, there's different ways of being dynamic. You don't have to have dynamic colors, dynamic values. Something can be dynamic and also be sublime, right? Anybody can just throw a bunch of bright colors and sharp angles and sharp filters to make something dynamic. It is more difficult to create a captivating piece that is sublime. That's what this piece is about. That's what's going to be your challenge for this particular piece. So, groundwork to finesse. Yeah, you've laid excellent groundwork. All of this works really well for where it is at this stage. Now it's all about finessing it. So, which will be going over the color, the forms, and the background. That's the three main things that I'm looking at. And oh yeah, here. So these are two portrait images that I had saved. Wow, it is really raining now. I apologize for the audio. There's not much I can do. Let me check to see if I can adjust the gain on this to... All right, adjust the gain a little bit. It's going to clip my voice some, but hopefully it cuts down a little bit on the rain in the background. So here are two paintings with the female face, and these are excellent examples. Like, this is not dynamic by most terms, but it is captivating. Now, both of these are excerpts. There's more image around both of these, but yeah. But they're very well handled, and they're beautiful. They draw you in. And if you look at the detail, like, this is not detailed as most people would call detailed. It's still very loose, but what it has is accurate drawing. Things are in the right place and they're the right size and they're basically the right value, but he has expressive brush strokes, and that's what gives it so much of the dynamic feel to it. Also, it's not exactly realistic, right? He suggests some things are soft, some things a little harder. He picks and chooses what information he wants to draw out. Now, this one isn't nearly as free-flowing with the brush strokes, but it's still very well handled. Like, everything is very clean and well chosen. So we want to take that sort of approach with yours. I did a little paint over stuff here, but what I'm going to do is step through it with you. I was thinking about that again as I was getting ready to do stream. I think it would just be more effective if I did it here. So let's make a new layer and set that to color. And what I want to do is add some more color variation to the skin. The skin is all grayed out right now. There's not much variation, and the skin tone is going to give more interesting visual information to look at. Over here, you look at the skin tone. There's cool skin tone from this light, there's cool violet, there's warmer violet, there's oranges, there's yellows. Wow, that sounds like the thunderstorm, like tornado sort of weather. A lot of subtle skin tones down here. I'll just move closer to this and hopefully that'll help a little bit. There we go. Subtle skin variations down here on the nose, the lips, even a little bit on the cheeks, around the eyes. There's a lot of little stuff. So on this one, I'm gonna have the color layer, and I'm gonna set it down a little under halfway. I don't need full color control, I just need partial color control. And I'm gonna add some around the eyes. Now the eyes are gonna be, let's pull this over here. The eyes are gonna be warmer. So I'm gonna go with some violets around the eye to get us started. Some around the nose to warm them up. On the cheeks. I also want to make sure that I am... where did my brush window go? Properties? No? Did I close it? Yes. Okay. Nope, that's not the one I want. No, you stuck it behind somebody, and I don't know which one. Oh, brush settings. Here we go. Yep, it was behind the other window. So I'm going to turn on the color dynamics, so we have a little color variation. I'll put that here. And then I want to pick up more of a warmer tone. The capillaries are very close to the skin around the eyes and the eyelid, because the eyelid is very thin. And I just want to drop those in there. The nose also is generally a little warmer, and particularly on the underside. So I'm going to give that a bit more there on the underside. And the cheeks have color. Now, I'm going to stay away from as pink on the cheeks and let her Aquarian, biology make it a bit more violet. So I'll play loose with that. Also, the ears, though, the ears are going to be a great place to add some color. So I'm going to run in there with a bit more. Right? The eyes are looking a little too green in this area. They're going to have about the same color as the skin around there because she's already so pale. I'll just change that a little bit. Now on the eyes themselves, I'm going to make an adjustment. I'll do that under that layer. And you see down here, the irises look really big. Same thing here, the irises look really big. And just to push it slightly out of normal, I'm going to make the iris maybe a little bigger than what you would think. She has more of a Alita eyes, where they had to make Alita's irises in the movie bigger to keep her eyes from looking too weird. If you haven't watched that, I enjoyed that film. And the making ofs are pretty interesting too. If you haven't watched the makings of Alita. Yeah. Okay, so going back up to the color, that's feeling better. What about maybe adding, we've got the blues. Maybe just adding a bit more blues back in some of the shadow areas. Not letting it get too gray. Yeah, something like that. That'll work. Now I'll make a new layer on top of that. And I'm going to go with my angle brush. I don't know, I've just been having fun with him, so that's what I'm going to go with. And make sure that the color dynamics is turned on him as well. And I want to start, I like this. I'm going to go more brush strokey with it. And I want to come back and bring in some of the forms. We're losing some of the forms here. things are flattening down, getting a little 2D. So particularly the forms around here, I'm not getting the volume of the eye as much. I may have the shape of the eye and the shape of this curve, but I don't really feel like there's a volume there. Also, the forms of the volume of the nose feel off. The eyebrows are getting really stark, almost like they're painted on. Well, this is a really good example of an eyebrow. Watch how it has this, pattern to it there. But it fades, right? It doesn't just have this harsh edge to it. So, I'm going to grab some other colors. And I want to start blending some of this. And I'm also changing the angle a little bit. Letting that drop down a little bit. It's like she's maybe concerned. She's thinking. She's hesitant. She hasn't just completely joined over that you were okay. And then I'm going to grab some more bluish because that's kind of the shadow color. But that's too bright. Back up. And I want to soften this together a little bit. So this is bringing some color back into it. Now under the eye, I want to get a bit more of that tone. That's a little too big. I'm thinking in terms of planes. I was just talking about shape versus form. What I'm trying to do is come back here and add some more form. Like you can see this angle right there. Now we don't have the exact same light, but that angle exists. And we have an upwards light direction coming down. I'm going to have a little bit angle there. Now the nose here, the lighting here is closer than what this one is, unless you want to add that side light. In which case, following that one, we want a bit more of the nose shadow. And outsides of the nose, because the light's kind of coming from the front. Soften some of that together. Now I want some of the pops of warm. They're in tear duct area. And I want to bring some color and brush strokes into the eyelashes. I want to try to pull out more form from this by letting that change in angle there. We can also try to get the cheek to round a little bit more. punch up the nostrils a little bit. But what we're missing is some of the forms here. Like if you look at this, you've got the main ball of the nose here. That's too small. I cannot see that. I don't know where you keep changing it. There. You've got the main form of there. And then it comes up and it loops back under itself. So we want this to come up and back under. And this to be the ball right here. Then you have that nostril kind of sphere on both sides. The nose felt a little big in this one. I'm going to slim that up just a little bit. So adding some of those color variations, skin variations, coming up here, also probably stepping over into some of the blues, and we can do some hair stuff here. Let's turn these guys off for a second. Instead of just letting that be a dark mess, we can bring out a little bit. Also that ear on the other side, we need to hit it with the same color. I'm going to let that fall over here. Let that kind of come up there. Create some more interesting shapes off of here. That's fine, but let's continue it. So there's more of them. And that sort of thing. And let's take away so much black from the background so she stands out more. Like I said on the other image, don't paint the light, paint what the light hits. So we can have the light something like that. With the light stretching across the horizon area, but then it can be catching the rim with this sort of halo light, but not fuzzy light, not fuzzy halo light, actual light on the object. Some of the thin bits of hair would be backlit. Even though it's black hair, it'll look white if you put the proper light on it. And we get some highlights in the water. Just specular lights, water across there. Maybe you get a little bit of indication of some of the form, like on this boat or something back here. No. I think that's as far as I'm gonna go with it. But yeah, you start coming in here and looking for. I just say that, and then it's like I forgot. You know, looking at like the thickness of the eyelid here, and you start. That's another spot you could add a little pop of color right along that thickness, because that's going to be catching some of the light coming down. And, you know, that would be nice. Working in some of the subtler little forms around the eye and the nostril. And then see about, you know, with this one, now, even if it had like a kind of like a skeleton nose, you know, like it had no nose. It was just the nasal cavity. something like that. So I think you can take it there. What you're going to do is focus on not big punches of color and big contrast and dynamics of the whole scene. What you got to do is you wow the people on the small scale. So it's like what you got on this, right? It's really good when you start looking at it. You start having fun on the small scale, and you have these little variations of color, these little variations of values and that sort of thing. So that when you look at it, there's all these little interplays of contrasting colors and and values and all that. So anyway, that's hopefully useful to you. Tyler's the last one, wasn't it? Yeah, that's it. So thank you everybody who joined in on the Siren and Enchanter Workshop Challenge. It was an honor, frankly, to be allowed to look at these and give you feedback. And I hope that you guys will join in on another challenge. Next time, of course, is the Valkyrie and Oni Hunter. And I will get that put together and should go up tomorrow sometime. I don't know exactly what time. I have some other things I have to do tomorrow. But I will put it out on the Facebook group and let you know. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? Nope. I think that's it. Everybody that joined in the live stream, thank you. Also, thank you for your comments and your questions. Make sure you join next week for a new Vibrance episode. And appreciate you guys. Until you see you next time, keep drawing.